Morning, is it? Yes, it's still good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for your welcome and also your introduction. It's been lovely to be here today. In fact, I should have started by saying Makuma Yabazaboy, and then you'd have shouted out, praise God, because that's the traditional way in which we speak to people in Uganda. But thank you so much to the friends here at Westwoodhill. We really appreciate your partnership with us over so many years now in connection with the work at Luero, and a very special thank you to Team 2018. Thank you so much for your investment and your input into the work at Luero. It was greatly appreciated. I've spoken several times to Gabriel about your visit, and he was greatly enthused by the time and the effort that you put into the work there. And I bring greetings to you from Gabriel. I'm in touch with him several times every week, and he knows that I'm here today, and so he says a special word of greeting to the friends here at Westwoodhill and also to Team 2018. So thank you so much. And it's been a wonderful report that we've heard today. This has been the 6th time we've had a group of pupils go from Duncan Rig out to Luero. On the first occasion, 4 pupils went by themselves, no teachers. That was pioneer work. But since then, we've had now 5 groups go, and we're just so grateful to you for your partnership with us. And I think in connection with that, it would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the work of Lenny Prentice. Lenny sadly died a couple of weeks ago, and it was through him that Gabriel was first introduced to the primary schools in this area and also to Duncan Rig Secondary School. And it's largely because of that link that Lenny created that the relationship and the partnership has developed. And so I want to acknowledge that, particularly this morning. Lenny was a good friend of myself personally, and also of Luero. And he also served as a trustee of our Luero community projects. And so Lenny's investment should not be underestimated. We appreciate the import that he put into the project there. But I'd like to turn briefly to God's Word and to say something that might encourage and help and also challenge each one of us in the time that we're here this morning. There's a verse in the Old Testament, Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse number 1, and these are the words that we read. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. And what the writer is trying to do here and in the following verses is to remind us of the importance of getting time into its proper perspective. I don't know whether you realise this or not, but when you and I woke up this morning, a bank account had been opened in our name. It's a personal account, and no one else has any access to it whatsoever. It's a current account, and it has a credit balance. And in this particular account, you can never be overdrawn. You don't need a password to get into it. You don't need a PIN number. You can use it freely, but you can't transfer anything in this account to a savings account. No deposits are allowed in this account, only withdrawals, and there's never a carry forward balance, and it must be used today. You maybe didn't realise that. I just hasten to add, I haven't solved your financial problems. There's no money in that account, just time. Time. When you and I woke today, an account had already been opened in our name. 24 hours had been deposited. And when we woke, maybe 7 or 8 hours had already been used. We're almost halfway through the time that's been allocated to us today. And we draw on that account 1 second at a time. And it's for our own personal use. We must use it. We can't save it. And we can't use it before it's due. doesn't matter today whether your name is President Trump or Theresa May or Nicola Sturgeon. We've all got 24 hours in which to use today. And perhaps there's a challenge for you and I there. How do we use our time? I want to just take a bit of time this morning to think about the subject of time. And the first thought that I have is that time is treasure. Time is treasure. It's a word that features in our language. We often hear the phrase, time and tide waits for no man. Apparently it's a phrase that was first coined in 1225 AD. We talk about a stitch in time. We talk about a race in time. We talk about time flies. We talk about spare time, wasting time. We talk about being pressed for time. We often hear the business community say time is money. We talk about passing time or things being lost in the midst of time. We talk about being ahead of time, time off, time out, short of time. We say, where's the time gone? And we talk about technology time, where parents restrict the amount of time their children can spend using technology during the course of the day. I'm finding that with our grandchildren. And so time is a word that features greatly in our language. It was back in 1923 when a man called Henry Luce captured the importance of this word time. He's going to launch a new weekly news magazine, and the title he chose for his magazine was Time Magazine. It is still with us today. And so time is a gift. But it's a gift from God. It's an integral part of creation. The universe is a great timepiece set in eternity. And when God made time, he made lots of it. And what's more, he gave you and me some of it. And it may well be that we might live our allotted span of 70 years, maybe shorter, maybe longer. The psalmist says the length of our days is 70 or 80 years if we have the strength. But God has given to you and to I time, precious time, as part of his creation and part of his eternal purposes. And so time is treasure. And if it's treasure, it's a gift. Gifts are for receiving. We need to thank the giver. Thank the giver for the time the giver has given us, for our use, for our pleasure, for our enjoyment. And each day, God renews that precious gift of time. Another 24 hours tomorrow, if we're spared. And tomorrow, if we have life. When we get out of bed and put our feet on the ground, and we look ahead to what's left of the 24 hours ahead of us, we have another gift. Time is treasure. Another 24 hours. But as well as being a gift, time carries a test, because ultimately all time belongs to God. And the question for you and me today is, how do we use the time that God has given to us? Do we use it, or do we just lose it? Do we spend it on just ourselves, rather selfishly? Or do we spend the time on others? Or do we devote some of our time to God? Story told in the New Testament, a story that Jesus told. And he spoke about a businessman. And he was going away on a business trip, and he gave 5 talents. Now, a talent was worth about a week's wages. And so he gave 5 weeks of wages to one man. He gave 2 weeks of wages to another man, and he gave 1 week of wages to a third man. And he said, I'm going away, and when I come back, you'll need to give account of the money that I've given to you. Sometime later, he came back, and to the one to whom he'd given 5 talents, he said, what have you done with it? And the man said, well, I've doubled it. I've made another 5 talents. I've got 10 talents. Here they are. And the businessman said to him, congratulations, well done. And then he turned to the man to whom he'd given 2 talents and said, what have you done with it? Oh, he said, I've doubled it as well. I've got 2 more talents. I've now got 4 talents. And the businessman said, well done. Congratulations. But then he came to the man who'd only had 1 talent. And he said, what have you done with it? Oh, he said, I knew that you were a hard businessman. He said, I put it on the ground. He said, I buried it. But here it is. You've got your 1 talent back. And the businessman criticised, he condemned him for the way in which he'd failed to use the gift that had been given to him. I like to think of that man in the story of Jesus as being a 1st century Alan Sugar and saying to the man, you're fired. You're fired. Between the 12th, the 10th and the 24th of October this year, 4 staff members and 18 pupils used their time wisely. They went to help others who were less privileged than themselves. And not just them. Parents and friends and relatives and colleagues at school, pupils and teachers supported them. They sacrificed time. They sacrificed effort to support and make the trip possible. And in doing that, I want to say to those of you who didn't go, but who supported the trip, you were part of what was done at Coalface. I go time and time again to Africa. I've had 25 trips to Africa in the last 15 years. It's called retirement. And 18 of them have been to Uganda. But there are many people who support the work we do and have never been able to go to the Coalface. But by their support, their practical support, their financial support, their prayers, they have been part of the work in Uganda. And I want to thank everyone here today who's been part of that tremendous work in Uganda. The challenge for you and for me is, how do we use the time that we've got? You say, I can't go to Africa. Nobody's asking you to. What we're saying is, what are you doing with your time? You may be saying, well, I'm too busy. I don't have the resources. My studies are important. I can't do much. You don't know about the kind of problems I've got. You don't know how difficult it is. I'm not as able now as I used to be. I'm not asking anybody to go to Africa. I'm simply asking you, how are you using the time that you had? The precious 24 hours in every day. The Apostle Paul wrote to the church at Ephesus, and he spoke about himself in this way. He said, Paul, the prisoner of Jesus Christ. And there was the Apostle Paul in prison. And what did he do? He used his time to speak to his fellow prisoners. He used his time to write letters. And instead of restricting his freedom, and instead of opting out, Paul opted in and used the time, yes, even there in prison, wisely. Some of us will remember a government minister some years ago, a man called Jonathan Aitken, the disgraced cabinet minister in one of Margaret Thatcher's governments. He was taken to court and he was, as a result of the trial, imprisoned. And he spent time in Belmarsh prison. But while he was there, he became a Christian. He accepted Jesus Christ as his Lord and as his Saviour. And his whole life was turned around. And whilst he was in prison, he discovered that 23 inmates could neither read nor write. So what he did was he offered. He offered to read letters that had been sent to them. He offered to write letters for them to send home. And it wasn't long before a queue formed at his cell door. And one day an Irish inmate, so grateful to Jonathan Aitken for the work that he'd done for him by writing to his family and communicating with them, he came along to Aitken's cell and he said, I'm going to let you borrow my porno magazines, he said, as a way of saying thank you to you. Mind you, he said, just borrow them. He said, I'm not going to give them to you. And Aitken said this. He said, no thanks. He said, I'm on a different path now. I'm serving God and I'm following Jesus Christ. That inmate was so impressed that he started to read a Bible and he started to pray. And as a result of that, a small Bible study group was formed that Aitken led, and 16 prisoners became Christians through the work of Jonathan Aitken. How would you spend your time if you suddenly found yourself imprisoned in some kind of way? I've recently been visiting Polmont Prison to visit somebody. I'll be going back again, God willing, later this week. But there's a real challenge about how you find or use your time when you're restricted in some kind of way. Now, you might not be in prison, but you might find yourself in life in some kind of restriction. You're restricted in what you could do, where you can go, the kind of places that you can get to, and so on. And you maybe feel that you cannot do much, but we can all do something. Some time ago, somebody gave my wife a bunch of flowers. And in amongst this bunch of flowers were some twigs. And these twigs have been sprayed in gold paint. And so you've got these wooden twigs with just a film of gold paint completely sealing them. And she put these twigs with the flowers in a pot of water. And we watched to see what would happen. And over a period of weeks, something quite remarkable happened. Suddenly, the gold paint started to crack in certain places. And underneath, there was a little green bud. And that little green bud started to push through. There was evidence of life. Even though it was restricted, it was doing something. And maybe you feel in some way you're restricted in life. You can't do all that you would like to do. But despite the restrictions that we have, God is willing to work in our lives and produce something of beauty, produce something of quality in your life and mine. And often doing what is right is just doing what's in front of you. So time is treasure, time is a test, but also time is temporary. Time is temporary. Time won't last forever. The world of science tells us that the world is slowing down. Politicians, bless their hearts, always warn us of brighter days ahead, but dark days in the short term. It's been like that every time I've listened to a politician for the last 70 years, I think. And something tells us, common sense tells us, that things just cannot continue as they are. And one day, God's going to stop the clock. He's going to stop the clock either by you or I dying, or he's going to stop by the fact that Jesus Christ is going to return to the earth. Now that is what Christians believe, that one day Jesus Christ, in the same way that he came 2,000 years ago, is going to come and come again in sometime in the coming future. And one day, when that happens, God will start to roll up history. And when God rolls up history, you and I, whether we like it or not, will have to stand before God and give account of the time we have spent here on planet Earth. To everything, says the writer, there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. And everything you and I do will be judged in the light of eternity. Just 3 weeks ago, you maybe have forgotten it now, but 3 weeks ago, across our nation and in parts of Europe, men, women and young people and children acted in unison. We all put our clocks back by 1 hour. Do you remember that? Between 2 o'clock and 1 o'clock in the morning, we put our clocks back. What did you do with the extra hour that you're given as you move from British summertime into Greenwich meantime? Mind you, we're only getting back the hour that was stolen from us in March of this year when the clocks were put forward. But how do we use it? My guess is that most of us stayed asleep for an extra hour or spent the extra hour in our bed. But here's a question. Just supposing somebody said to you, you are going to be given 1 hour of your past life to relive again. You're going to get a whole hour of your past life, and you can choose whatever you want, just to relive it. I wonder what hour you might choose. Would it be another hour in Luero? Would it be another hour working with the children there? Would it be another hour, an hour of great joy, an hour of great excitement? If only you could savour that hour once again. Maybe there's an hour in your life you just wish in some way you could relive and enjoy it because of all that it meant to you. Or is there an hour that perhaps, if you were to relive, things would be different? You'd make sure you didn't make the same mistake again. You'd change the way in which you did things. You'd right a wrong. You maybe wouldn't say something, or you'd take a different approach to things. You maybe would act wiser. I don't know what the answer would be for you, but we cannot change the past, but we can affect the future, because this is your time and my time. This is your day. This is my day. And how are we going to use our time? Are we going to use our time wisely? As I say, you cannot alter the past, but today is the first day of the rest of your life. The Old Testament writer says it is time to seek the Lord. And every moment of every day is an opportunity to live our lives for Jesus Christ. Every day is an opportunity for us to serve him in some kind of way, in the ordinary things of life. Just doing what's in front of us. And it's worthwhile taking time just to dedicate our lives to Jesus Christ. Because if we do it in time, we will never regret it in eternity. May God bless each of our hearts. Thank you so much for your time this morning. God bless you.
Thank you, Ernie. We've come to the end of our service now this morning. Thank you all for being here and for that